President Granger congratulates new Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister and looks forward to continued good relations with that country. Georgetown to be the greenest city in the Caribbean, and the President believes that Guyana cannot progress without a professional public service. Those topics and more on The Public Interest.
Hello again, Guyana, and welcome to The Public Interest. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. As always, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
All right, great to have you as always. And of course, joining us today on the panel are two journalists from the mainstream media. I begin by introducing Ms. Olutoyi Allen from the Stabrook News and also Mr. Tejram Mohabir from the Guyana Chronicle. Welcome to you both. Great to have you. On today's program, today's edition, I'd like to focus on three major issues that are impacting our nation at this time. Of course, that's the impact of the results of Trinidad and Tobago's recent elections, the reformation of the public service in Guyana, and of course, the Brigadier's quest to make Guyana a green nation, so to speak. Sir, let's first begin with what's happened, or I should say what has happened in Trinidad and Tobago. Following recent elections, of course, Mr. Keith Rowley, actually Dr. Keith Rowley is now the new Prime Minister of that Twin Island Republic. What does the change from a partnership government mean to Guyana's current partnership government at this time?
Well, I don't think that the entry of the PNM as a single party into the government of Trinidad and Tobago is necessarily significant in terms of its comparison with a coalition or a partnership. What is significant is that Guyana's relations with Trinidad and Tobago will remain intact. Trinidad is a very important economy, a very important part of the Caribbean community. And in our relations with Venezuela, particularly this year, in the wake of the decree issued by President Maduro, Trinidad was very strong in support of Guyana, and I'm confident that Dr. Rowley will maintain this position. Trinidad has traditionally been very strong in support of Guyana's territorial integrity. From the time of Dr. Eric Williams, we have been able to rely on Trinidad and Tobago. So the significance is that Trinidad and Tobago will remain a staunch partner within the Caribbean community.
All right. So let's now move to your quest to reform Guyana's public service. What are some of the main initiatives that would have to be taken to ensure that this is done?
Well, within the first week of entering office, I announced that I was interested in a strong professional public service. And part of that professionalism will come from training. So we intend to establish a public service training college so that all new entrants into the public service would receive training before they take up their appointments. So that is the basis of the first initiative. At the higher levels, of course, we want to see more career public servants so that when new ministers or political appointees enter their jobs, at whatever level, there will be a cadre of trained public servants who could advise and guide and do research and provide information for them. So we expect that in the fullness of time, certainly during the course of the next 5 years, there will be a stronger and more professional public service than we have at present.
And sir, finally, before I give the other members of the panel an opportunity to pose their questions, when you initially took office, you were on a quest to make Guyana, quote unquote, a green nation. There seems to be a bit of a slowdown where that is concerned. What are your sentiments on us going forward in terms of making Guyana a green nation?
Well, my first sentiment is one of disagreement. I believe that the idea of greenness is catching on. I see the Mayor and City Council in Georgetown have announced that Georgetown is to become the cleanest and greenest city in the Caribbean. So I would believe that it is gaining momentum. The whole idea is to tackle the problems of solid waste, tackle the problems of litter, tackle the problems of the destruction of trees and parapets and vegetation, and the parking of vehicles, helter-skelter in the city. But we also want to see, as of on the 3rd of October next month, there'll be National Tree Planting Day. We want to see more vegetation. We want to see the parks being restored, the parade, what used to be called the parade ground, now Independence Park, the Promenade Gardens, the Botanical Gardens. We want to see a regreening of Georgetown, and we want to take this message to other places, Bartica, Mahdia, Lethem, Mabaruma. We want to see Guyana greening again. So it's not just cleaning, but it's also making Guyana more environmentally friendly as well.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
But we're not slowing down.
Okay, great to know, sir. At this time, I'd like to open up or to invite the other journalists on the panel to pose their questions, of course, regarding some of our lead topics and other questions that they may have, beginning with Ms. Allen from Starbrook News.
Mr. President, in relation to Trinidad, could you say what are some of the priorities that we'll be discussing with Trinidad, and would this include accessing oil from Trinidad?
It would include accessing petroleum. Trinidad is a very important partner within the Caribbean community. We want to see greater progress on the Caribbean single market and economy. We also want to see that the agenda that Guyana is responsible for, that is agriculture, would be advanced. As you know, the community's food import bill is very large, and we expect that Guyana particularly would be able to use this opportunity to export more agricultural commodities to Trinidad and Tobago and to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean in particular. And you're quite right that Trinidad is a major petroleum producer, and although we are part of Petrocaribe, we cannot depend entirely on Petrocaribe, on Venezuelan petroleum, and we would be walking on two legs. We'd be accessing petroleum from Trinidad as well. So friendly relations in Trinidad have been traditional, and we expect that under Dr. Rowley the relations will continue and get even stronger.
Just a follow-up to that, sir. Could you say what percentage of our oil we hope to access from Trinidad, and are we looking for deals similar to Petrocaribe?
Well, that will be a matter for the Trinidad and Tobago government. The concessions offered by Venezuela were part of a bigger arrangement under the Bolivarian Alternative for the Americas, ALBA. And I am not sure that Trinidad will want to have a similar deal. But Trinidad has been traditionally the main supplier of petroleum. I can't give you the actual percentage, and I think it will continue to be under Dr. Rowley.
Teodram, would you like to pose a question?
Yes, from the look of it, Georgetown seemed to be returning to the state of being a garden city.
I'm glad you agree.
Yes. How would this effort be maintained?
But largely through the City Council. One of the biggest problems we had in Georgetown over the last 20 years is the sort of Cold War between the central government and the municipal authorities. And we feel the Cold War is now at an end. We now have Tom Clark, who is responsive to the needs of the council, the elected council. We are now moving towards local government and municipal elections. And we have cordial relations with the City Council. We want to help the City Council to help themselves to make Georgetown the capital of an independent state. And many visitors coming to Georgetown over the past 20 years or so have been very disappointed at the condition of the city. Well, that will stop now. This is an effort being pioneered by the City Council itself, and we want to give them all possible support. It's not a central government responsibility, but we will help the City Council to help itself to clean up the city.
I know there is another matter. I don't know if any of the journalists wish to pose questions on the public service reformation program.
Yes, sir. What's your vision for the public service, and how do you intend to see it, or what do you want to see of it in the next 5 years?
This country cannot run without an efficient public service. And I would say combined with its efficiency is its professionalism, which means that the persons who go into the public service must aim at working there for a career, throughout their careers, maybe 30 or even long 30 years, 40 years perhaps. And without an efficient public service, no part of this country could run. Not aviation, not public health, not police or law enforcement. So what I want to do is make sure people are properly educated and well trained before they enter the public service. That's what I want to see. Second, regardless of which political party is in office, I want to see the public servants performing their functions efficiently, providing advice and information to their ministers, and carrying out their duties, whether they are in forestry, whether they're in mines, whether they're in customs. I want to see an unbribable public service, so that whenever a foreigner comes in, an investor comes in, he will see in the public servant, whether in or out of uniform, he'll see in the public servant somebody who is committed to enforcing the laws of Guyana and to serving the public. That's what I want to see. And when I leave office, or when my first term expires in 2020, I think we'll achieve that objective, re-professionalizing the public service. So anywhere you go, to the post office, to the police station, you will get service. That's what I want to see.
Mr. President, since the coalition government has come into power, one of the criticisms has been the number of ministries that we now have. Prior to 1992, the PNC, which is now a large part of the coalition, had restructured the public service and had brought it down to 12 core ministries. Mm-hmm. The PPP would have did their own thing when they were in power, but why didn't the coalition keep probably 12 ministries instead of several?
Well, we started with 12 ministries, but the workload could not be borne by those 12 ministries. And we also have 6 partners in the coalition. As part of the Cummingsburg Accord, we were committed to giving the Alliance for Change had a certain demand, which was for the Ministries of Agriculture, Tourism, Public Security, and Public Infrastructure. And of course, there was a question of proportionality. So those ministries could not be diminished because they were part of the agreement. And in fact, there are only 14 core ministries, 15 core ministries. The Ministry of the Presidency has several major departments which are treated as ministries. For example, social cohesion, and also governance and citizenship. So it is not as though there was a massive cabinet. The cabinet technically is smaller than it was under the PPP.
But not in terms of the ministers, sir.
Well, there is a large number of non-cabinet ministers who are ministers within the ministry, but these are not independent. There's one Ministry of Communities, but there are 2 ministers within that ministry in addition to the subject minister. But there's only one Ministry of Communities. But there is a subject minister, there's a minister who has been given certain responsibilities, housing and other functions, and there's another minister, Don Hastings, who has other ministerial responsibilities. But really there's only one Minister of Communities, that is Mr. Ronald Bulkan.
We must move on from this segment. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I'd like to give the journalists on the panel an opportunity to pose questions, burning issues they may have for His Excellency. Of course, this is outside of the 3 main topics that we mentioned earlier, of course, and this time I'll begin with you, Tejram.
Yes, thank you, Malika. Mr. President, would there be any revamp of the anti-narcotics unit? There's CANU and then there's the police force. There are 2 units practically doing the same thing.
Well, they're not doing the same thing, but I prefer a single strong unit. I agree with you that the duties of the police anti-narcotics unit and the customs anti-narcotics unit should be merged. Right now, the police anti-narcotics unit is the smaller of the 2, and it seems to focus largely on mobile operations and eradication operations, particularly against marijuana. But there's an overlapping function. CANU has the greater or the wider national responsibility, and that focuses largely at the airport and the other ports of entry. The duties still have to be harmonized, but CANU is itself a misnomer, the name Kano, because it is not administered by the customs. It is actually administered by the Ministry of Public Security at present. So the two functions have to be harmonized. We don't need two, we need one strong unit. And that unit is going to be the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit.
Yeah, just a follow-up. Would there be a change in the head of Kano?
I cannot tell you that. We're not anticipating a change in the head of Kano at this point.
Right. Ms. Allen?
But does that mean, sir, in relation to the same question, that the police will no longer be involved in narcotics?
The police have to be involved because they have to do investigations, they have to do laboratory work, forensic work as well, determining whether the commodities which have actually been seized or discovered are illegal narcotics. So I'm not eradicating that, but what I'm saying is the enforcement aspect, the patrols, the vehicles, the aircraft, will probably fall within one unit rather than, as you say, shared between two units.
And that unit will be Kano?
Well, however it's designated, there'll be a single anti-narcotics unit. Whether it's called Kano or not, I can't say at this point in time. It is something to be determined by cabinet.
Okay. Yes.
You're now free to move on to another question.
Yes. On another issue, sir, last weekend, Prime Minister Nagumotu had publicly proposed to the PPPC, a national unity government, or having talks with them. What is your concept of this?
Well, it is a commitment that the coalition made in its manifesto during the campaign. And speaking for a partnership for national unity, that's why we call ourselves APNU, because we are committed to inclusionary democracy, which, as you know, is part of the national constitution. But after the coalition was formed, it was adopted, and we felt we should proceed along the same lines. And as I've said before, we've got 51%, and I do not see that it is prudent or an intelligent strategy to lock 49% of the electorate out of government. So we had at all times aimed at having an inclusionary democracy, an inclusionary government, so that the 49% don't feel locked out. So the Prime Minister was quite right. It is part of the philosophy of the coalition that we have some form of sharing and some form of national unity, some form of inclusionary governance. So that is part of the coalition philosophy, yes.
But it doesn't include, sir, executive power sharing, maybe offering the opposition some cabinet positions?
We have started to speak. We had a meeting with the leader of the opposition, and we respect his views. He has to discuss things within the party. He belongs to PPP. And whatever proposals they come with, we are prepared to consider. But right now we are in talks, and we don't want to jeopardize the talks. And I've met Mr. Jagdeo. We had a very cordial meeting, and I look forward to the development of this concept. But we want to deliver to the Guyanese people an inclusionary government. And let's see where the discussions lead.
Tejan?
Mr. President, year after year, we have the Amerindian Month celebrations. The Amerindians are brought from the various communities to Georgetown to engage in the celebrations, and they're drinking and sporting and so on. One of the things I observed, probably from the look of it, it doesn't appear that the celebrations is focused in any way, or give me any strong focus, apart from the cultural, the preservation of their culture. Is there any move to have those celebrations include entrepreneurship and more focus on community-based tourism and so on and so forth?
Well, yes, as you know, several events occurred serially. I see. The first was the National Tushaus Conference, and that was a very important annual event, and more or less it merged into Amerindian Heritage Month. And what we see happening is that some of the points which were raised at the National Tushaus Conference involved what I call building happy households. It involved entrepreneurship, involved several other things, education, strengthening the role of women within the communities. So we see stronger economies. The hinterland, where most of the indigenous people live, is the richest part of the country. It's rich in timber, it's rich in minerals, and it has great ecotourism potential. So we would like to see greater entrepreneurship, but at the base of the economy is the education system. And we have to reform the education system so that more children in indigenous communities have access to education. There are fewer dropouts, there's a higher quality of teaching, and more people graduate who can go into university and go into tertiary, other forms of tertiary education, either vocational level or the university level. So there's got to be a lot more spade work. So it is not true that they only come down to Georgetown because many of the indigenous celebrations take place countrywide. Every year a different village is elected. I think this year it will be Santa Arta. But many of the celebrations occur outside of Georgetown.
Yep. It's Indigenous Heritage Month. Is there any, or do you believe that probably these celebrations should be held in the Amerindian communities rather than in Georgetown?
Yes and no. Certainly, indigenous people are part of the national population, part of the national community. But many people living on the coastline are not aware of the customs, the rituals, the culture, the practices of the indigenous people. This is a point I made both at the celebrations here and at the National Two Shows Conference. Sometimes you have public servants, spending months or years in the hinterland who can't speak a word of the indigenous language in the communities where they live, or Akawai or Arakuna or Patamona or Wapishana. So it is a two-way street. It is good for the indigenous people to come to town so that people in Georgetown or the coastal areas are more aware of their customs and are more respectful of the indigenous people. Equally, these celebrations should also be held in the hinterland to generate greater pride and a sense of identity. So we don't want to treat Indigenous Peoples Month, as it's called now, as something which is exclusive. It is inclusionary, and all the Guyanese people should be proud of the heritage. When you look at a map, most of the names you find there are names that were given to those features, rivers, mountains, by indigenous people. The plants and the animals that we see in the hinterland were all named by the indigenous people. So we are all Guyanese, and the celebration of Indigenous Peoples Month is a very important part of our national culture. And as I said, it is good for the people in the coastland, on the coastland, to be part of that celebration because it demystifies, race, and it creates this feeling of integration. It's ours after all. Not just the pepper pot, but everything that people stand for. And important part of it too is appreciating the language and the culture, the way people do things. And that is why I also insisted that it should permeate the education system. So some of the education, some of the instruction should also be in a language that they use at home.
Thank you, Your Excellency. At this time, with moments left in the program, I will allow one final question from Ms. Allen from Starbrook News.
Wow.
Time flies.
Yes. Very much so, sir. And I hope I'm not accused of going back. But on the same issue of national unity, if there is no power sharing, sir, is your government prepared to move to a referendum for a constitutional change?
I don't follow you. If there's no power sharing, we are in talks, and we have not been made any offer by the PPP. They have not asked for anything, so we are continuing to talk with them, and we don't want to prematurely determine what they're going to ask for. Well, let's see what, as I said, we had a meeting with Mr. Jagdeo, and we respect his position, and we expect to be moving at the pace that they determine. We don't want to force the pace.
What is constitutional change on the agenda
there will be, yes. We've already done the preliminary work as part of our 100-day plan, and there will be constitutional change, but it will be broad-based. It wouldn't be a boardroom change. It will be based on open, public, transparent consultation.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And of course, thank you very much to the members of the panel. Unfortunately, this is where we have to bring the curtains down on this edition of The Public Interest. Of course, with me would have been Ms. Oluwatoyi Allen from Stabrook News, a very interesting and unique name.
Yes,
and
indeed.
of course, Mr. Tejram Mahabir from the Guyana Chronicle. Thank you very much for both of you for joining us. And of course, His Excellency, the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, President Brigadier David Granger. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us, and do join us again next time. Goodbye.